Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir. Visible.
Okay, thank you. So, since in yesterday's class we are discussing about different type of intake, to collect the water from the source, and we have discussed about, if you go to the previous slides, we have discussed about the characteristics features of intakes. Now, in today's class, we should be knowing a bit more about the different type of intake structures and how they work. And with this we are going to end this part of this particular module. So, if you see, according to the type of source, we have four different type of intake structures. We have lake intake, we have reservoir intake, we have river intake, and we have canal intake. Now, apart from that, from the type of structures, if we say according to the position of the intake, so there are some intake structures which are. Yeah, so there are some intake structures which are actually exposed in the source, and those are known as exposed intake. And there are structures on the other hand which are not exposed, so that they will be in submerged condition within the water body itself, and they are basically known as submerged intake. Now, apart from that, according to the presence of water in the tower, that means the structure which consists this capacity of intaking the water. So, depending upon the presence of water in that particular structure, we can say, there are two different types. One is wet intake, another one is dry intake. Now, with this, the first one which we are going to discuss is the lake intake. So, as far as classification is concerned, these are the type which we will get, and here only we will be discussing, or we will be realizing whether this is a submerged one, whether this is a wet one. So those things are going to be clear once we discuss in detail about these different types of intake. So the first one is, the lake intake, and if I say. So basically, lake intakes are, you see here in this lake intakes are submerged one. From the figure itself, you can understand this, because in this figure, right hand side top, if you see, so we have shown the lake level. That means the water level at that particular lake, and you can see the structures, how these structures are constructed, and from there you can understand that this is a submerged one. So, for obtaining water from the lakes, mostly submersible intakes are used. These intakes are constructed in the bed of the lake below the water level, so as to draw water in dry season also. Fine. So that is the bottom of the line which should be kept in the mind, that we should be able to draw the water from the source throughout the year. These intakes have so many advantages, such as, no obstruction to the navigation, no danger from the floating bodies, and no trouble due to ice. Because see, these structures are actually constructed at the bed of that particular lake, or at the bed of the that water body, which is usually known as river bed. So, though we are discussing, lake intake, we are talking about river bed, but usually the bed is, whether it is in lake, whether it is in river, we say it as river bed. So keep that in your mind, and since it is constructed in that level, inherently it has some advantages, such as no obstruction to the navigation of the ships and other water vehicles, no danger from floating bodies, that is another one, and then there is no travel due to the ice. So what happens, during the winter in the permafrost areas, the top portion of the water body will be solidified, but then the bottom part will still remain as water and in liquid form, and that is why we'll get uninterrupted water from the lake intake. As these intakes draw small quantity of water, these are not used in big water supply schemes or on or on rivers or reservoirs. Fine. The main reason being that they are not easily approachable for maintenance. So that is another one aspect. They are not planned for bigger setup or bigger city. The reason is the quantity of water which you can collect from these intakes are not significant or not huge. And apart from that, there is another one problem. Since it is in the bed, we have some inherent advantages as well as we have some limitations also. See, once it is in the bed, it is very, very difficult, to use to maintain it, and because every time you should have such uh, support to go to the bottom of the bed and then do the maintenance work. So it is quite difficult in that way. Fine. So now we'll see how these structures are constructed. So mainly, if you see, the submerged lake intakes consist of simple concrete block or rock-filled timber clips supporting the starting end of the withdrawal pipe. And the same thing actually we have seen in the previous uh, so basically what happens is the inlet pipe, through which water comes from the source and it goes in the directly through the withdrawal conduits. It will go to the jack well, and from that jack well through the strainer pipe, through the strainer and then suction pipe, water will be drawn and will be sent to the treatment plant. So you need to remember, or you need to, when I discuss, you need to remember this figure, or you need to go through this figure while we discuss about the construction process. So these intake or the opening of these intakes is generally covered by the screen so as to prevent the entry of the debris or any ice, small ice, or into the withdrawal conduits. So that's what actually we have shown here. This portion is slotted. If you see, just let me show you. So this is the area which is slotted. So we have the cover and we have some slit into it through which water can come. However, all those debris which we are talking about, or ice crystals, would not be able to come and would not be able to pass through the withdrawal conduits. Now in So, in lakes where silt tends to settle down, and the intake opening is generally kept at about 2 to 2.5 meter above the lake bed to avoid entry of silt into the withdrawal pipe. So again, that's a big problem. If you have not studied that part well, and if you have not analyzed that water well, then what would happen is, if you make it just in the same level of that river bed, so because of this aggressive siltation, so the turbid water will go in the withdrawal pipe, and then you need more treatment efforts just to get rid of from those fine silty particles. So that is why, to avoid or to get rid of from this kind of situation, always these intakes are constructed a bit higher than the riverbed, which is around 2 to 2.5 meter. Now these intake structures are cheap, which we have discussed previously, and they are they have so many advantages which we have discussed. And apart from that, they are widely used in case of small water supply projects, drawing water from the streams or lakes having a little change in the water level throughout the year. So This is the main advantage of this, this lake intake structures. Now with this, we'll move to the next one. So that is the reservoir intake structures, and you can see here the reservoir intake structures and how it looks like. So if you see, reservoir intakes, and if we try to see this particular figure which I have shown here in the right hand side bottom, so first you try to see this figure, and then accordingly we'll discuss this reservoir intake. So we have the flexibility, or more flexibility than what we discussed in case of lake, because here we can facilitate, or our system can work even in lower water level. So our intake pipes are constructed in different levels, and that is actually operated by the outlet valves. Fine. So it consists of an intake well which is placed near the dam and connected to the top of the dam by the footbridge. Now wherever you see dam, where in practical area, we can see such kind of intake structures through which actually the water is collected for the water supply scheme. And the thing is, we have in this case an intake well which was not there in case of the previous. We simply, that withdrawal pipe was connected to the intake pipe was connected to the well which we discussed in the previous case. So that is basically jack well. Now in this case we have well in which the entire intake systems are constructed. Now the intake pipes are located at different levels with common vertical pipe, and the valves of the intake pipes are operated from the top, and they are installed in a valve room, as shown in this figure. Each intake pipe is provided with a bell mouth entry with perforation of fine screen on its surface. So in the left hand side, within the figure itself, you can see that intake pipes, it is written. So that is the bell mouth entry with perforation and of fine screen are actually constructed. And they are, as I mentioned, in the valve room, they all are connected. So we have the flexibility to open any one of them anytime and then close any one of them at any time. And all of them are connected to a common vertical pipe, and which is again connected to the outlet pipe. The foot bridge is also shown over here, and then the door of that particular well window and the entire, the valve room is shown at the top. So now, the outlet pipe is taken out through the body of the dam. So that is very obvious. You don't have any other option. And the outlet pipes should be suitably supported, since you are basically puncturing the dam and you are putting that through the dam. So it has to take a lot of loads, or the self weight of the dams, and that is why the support of the outlet pipes would be suitably or sufficiently provided, so that in later stage there is no collapse of that particular pipe. The location of the intake pipes at different levels ensures supply of water from a lower level than the surface level of the water. When the valve of an intake pipe is opened, the water is drawn from the reservoir to the outlet pipe through the common vertical pipe. So common vertical pipe is instrumental in every case, and whenever you are working with the top intake or whenever you are working with the bottom intake, in each case the vertical pipe is instrumental. And to reach up to the bottom of the intake from the floor of valve room, the steps should be provided in zigzag manner, so which has not been shown over here, but that should be provided. Now, okay, so when the valve of an intake pipe is opened, the water is drawn off from the reservoir to the outlet pipe through the common vertical pipe, as I mentioned, and we need to provide the steps to reach to the bottom, and thereby we can access and we can maintain this type of reservoir intakes anytime whenever it is required. By this, I'll now move to the river intake. So river intake is also a very important structures, and river intake is pretty much common. So the philosophy in this case is different. How? Usually, the water from the rivers is always drawn from the upstream side because it is free from contamination caused by the disposal of sewage in it. And that is why it is always, it should always be keeping in the mind that we need to collect the water through our river intake always from the top level of the water. So it is circular masonry tower of 4 to 7 meter in diameter constructed along the bank of the river, at such place from where required quantity of water can be obtained even in the dry period. This is very, very important, and the water enters in lower portion of the intake known as sump well from the penstocks. So this is the way in this case. So we have a sump well. We discussed previously about the sump well. So it will go to the sump well, and then from there, from the sump well, we'll have that suction pipe again. Through that, it will be sucked by the help of a pump, and then it will be again distributed to the treatment plant. So in this case, we have a pump room, and from that pump room, the pump will be operated. At the same time, those valves will also be operated, because we have here the penstocks with the screens, and through which the water will come in, depending upon in which layer we have this we have water present, and then accordingly the valve has to be operated, and then in the same sump well water will come and will gathered or stored, and that again will be taken out by the help of the pump by suction. Fine. So apart from that, few things should be kept in the mind. River intake is always located to the upstream of the city, so that the pollution and contamination is minimum. Right. Once it is in the downstream of the city, so you will have a very different and worse quality of water, and that is why it is always suggested to construct river intakes in the upstream of the city. They are either located sufficiently inside the river so that the demands of the water are met within with all the seasonal variation of the year, or they may be located near the river bank where a sufficient depth of water is available. Now, sometimes an approach channel is constructed and the water is led to the intake tower. So this is very important to remember. Suppose you are not getting the depth which is required to ensure availability of water throughout the year. What can be done is you create an approach channel, and then you construct this intake structure, and thereby you can ensure availability of the water throughout the year, because you are actually creating sufficient depth where water will come and get stored, and that can be collected periodically. But in this case, the utilization of penstock is very important, so through which water comes in the sump well. Now, another one very tricky situation is if the river bed is soft or unstable, the intake towers are constructed slightly away from the river bed, and the intake is kept submerged under the lower water level of the river. Now, it essentially consists of a rectangular or circular entry chamber with a strong grill at its top. So that is another situation where you have the river bed which is not stable. So these are the different situation where you need to encounter, which you would encounter as a civil engineer, and accordingly you will have to bypass all the limitations, and you will have to design structures which can sustain throughout the service life of the structure. So in that case, it will be quite similar to the lake intake. So you will create at the bottom, you will have a bell mouth entry with a with a very strong grill at the top, and then there will be a pipe conveying that water to the intake of the jack well, and from there you will basically, by the help of suction pipe, you will take that water and you will send it to the treatment plant. So these are the different limitations, or there are different situations which is not conducive for the construction, should be kept in the mind, and accordingly we'll have to plan. So see, I am telling in terms of telling stories, but if you face such kind of problem, you have to have some alternatives, or you have to have a backup plan, and that is very much required. If something goes unusual, how to tackle them, being a civil engineer, is the most important and most contemporary requirement in the application of civil engineering. So you keep that in your mind. Next is canal intake. So probably so why this is named as canal intake? They are constructed in the canal sections, and this intake chamber is constructed in the canal section, and this results in the reduction of the waterway, which increases the velocity of flow, and therefore it becomes necessary to provide pitching on the downstream and the upstream portion of the canal intake. So you are basically constructing within the channel of the canal, and that is the way you are basically reducing the overall the canal sections, and you are thereby increasing the velocity of the flow, and that is why pitching is required, to again whatever disturbance you are creating, so that you can you know maintain the sustainability to some extent. Now, the entry of the water in the intake chamber takes through core screens, and the top of the outlet pipe is provided with a fine screen. So you can see here we have the bell mouth entry of 1200 dia pipe. Fine, and we have the canal bed. You see that from here you can see. So this is the canal channel, we can say open channel, and then we have kept over here, considering the lower canal level, and this is the higher level. Fine, so within so it has to be always lower than the lower water level, and the structures are created in such a way that it facilitates coming of water into here, and it will get accumulated in these sections, and a core screen is provided so that all those big debris and other matters would not come in this, and then through the bell mouth, where we have again some kind of fine mesh, and through which water can be collected. The inlet to outlet pipe is of bell mouth shape with perforations of the fine screens, as I mentioned in previous case also. On its surface, the outlet valve is operated from the top, and it controls the entry of the water into the outlet pipe from where it is taken to the treatment plant. Fine. So this is the way canal intake is constructed. Next, I will be talking about the intake towers, so mostly wet intakes and dry intakes. So they are widely used on large number, in water supply schemes to draw the water from the rivers or reservoirs having large change in the water level. Wherever there is a change in the water level, we need to provide these towers. Now, intake towers, which is an integral part of the entire intake structure system, which, and in previous few cases when we are discussing about the different components of intake structures, we actually pointed out towers in few of the cases. Now we are going to discuss in detail about the purpose of keeping all those towers. Now, gate controlled openings called ports are provided at various levels in these concrete towers to regulate the flow. Now, in order to take the maximum advantage, or in order to take the uninterrupted water in your intake structures, such kind of intake towers are constructed. Fine. Now, if the entry ports are submerged at all levels, there is no problem of any clogging or damage, or by ice or debris. But if such problems are there, then to some extent it can be reduced by providing sophisticated appurtenances, and you can have interrupted water entry into your intake structure. So usually there are two types of intake towers: wet intake towers and dry intake towers. So first we will be talking about wet intake towers. So basically, wet intake towers, it consists of a concrete circular cell filled with water up to the reservoir level and has a vertical inside shaft which is connected to the withdrawal pipe. So the same thing actually we discussed previously. If you can see here also, we provided some this place you can see. So this is nothing but towers. So this entire one is nothing but the towers which we are now talking about separately over here. Fine. Yeah. So the withdrawal pipe may lie over the bed of the rivers, or maybe in the form of tunnels below the river bed. Openings are made into the outer concrete cells as well as into the inside shaft. Fine. Gates are usually placed on the shaft so as to control the flow of water into the shaft and in the withdrawal conduit. Now, the water coming out of the withdrawal pipe may be taken to the pump house for lift, or maybe directly taken to the treatment plant at lower elevation. Now, dry intake towers. So if you see here, this is the sectional view of the dry intake towers. So in this case, the water is directly drawn into the withdrawal conduit through the gated entry ports. So there is no separate structures where water is stored and then or water is getting accumulated. So directly from the source, water is drawn to the withdrawal conduit through the gated entry ports. It has no water inside the tower if its gates are closed. When the entry ports are closed, a dry intake tower will be subjected to additional buoyant force. Hence, it must be heavier construction than the wet intake tower. So this is very, very important to remember. Fine. So with this, we'll finish today. I will not discuss the next part. Maybe in next class, we'll start the new section again.